Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. So my classic album inspection today is Heart's self-titled album from 1985, released June 21st. It's 40 years old today. So this was a key album for Heart at the time. It's kind of quite controversial, which we'll come to the reasons for that. But basically Heart had been really big in the 70s with 4 platinum albums on the trot. And Jim Primba had been double platinum, big touring act. Still maintain out with Beverly Strange going gold, and then sales dropping off with Private Audition and Passion Works. The upshot was they lost their deal or left the Portrait label, and they signed with Capitol Records, and Capitol got producer Ron Neverson in, and they sort of insisted, look, we need hits, so we need to get outside songwriters in, song doctors to get hits. The band had a massive makeover. Went full MTV. I mean, if you look at the Passion Works videos, the kind of Anna Nancy have got the hair sort of a bit more curled up, it's a bit bigger, but they still sort of got that, almost that bridge between that kind of post, that kind of new wave image and the bigger hair of MTV. But by this point, it's a total makeover. I mean, what the cost was of the costumes and the shoot, I don't know, but recorded at Record Plant, another the place called The Plant in Sausalito, California. You know, a lot of money spent by the label pushing the band, and Heart were the first band to do this. Aerosmith, who would relative flop what they'd done with Mirror's album, they would bring in songwriters like Jim Vallance for the Permanent Vacation album, and that would prove, you know, popular. Same thing with Bon Jovi, co-writing with Desmond Child on the Slippery When Wet album, and again that worked. So this was a proven formula by the record labels. But I think the Heart album, don't quote me on this, is probably like the first hard rock album band where this happened. So that's always been the first controversy, is that Heart only write about 4 of the songs on this. I'll go through it. But what they have done is select amazing tracks, and some of these tracks are actually tried by other bands. The other thing is, you know, production by Ron Neverson, although a bit brittle, it cleverly uses the sort of modern techniques to bring out the best in the band, particularly Ann Wilson's voice and the guitars and so on, and bring Heart into the MTV era. I've always loved this album. I used to watch a show called Entertainment USA when I was a kid, so we only had 4 channels at that time in the UK, and Entertainment USA, there was a guy called Jonathan King presented that, a controversial figure. It was actually done for paedophilia later on, but he managed Genesis, he signed them to his label, I think, or he's certain he was an old boy of Charterhouse, the public school they went to, so he had a connection there. So he was involved in the music industry, but he did this show, he went to the USA, and he would go around the USA looking at different things, but he'd do a kind of chart feature every week of what was hot, and that's when I first saw the video for What About Love, and later on Never. I was instantly struck by the hook, and Wilson's amazing voice. Obviously Nancy Wilson and Anne look completely hot, especially Nancy. I developed an instant crush. So I went out and bought this album. There was a hi-fi shop in Lancaster near where I live, and there was a hi-fi place called Kenneth Gardner. Don't know how many branches there were around the UK. There was definitely a couple in my local area, and they had a small album sale section, and this was in there for £5.49. I always remember it's nearly in perfect condition sleeve, but it had a slightly irritating crease on it, which always bothered me. But right from when I put this album on, I loved it. Love It If Looks Could Kill. One of the best Heart tracks, written by Jack Conrad and Bob Garrett. But Heart make it their own. It's 3 minutes 42. What About Love? Sharon Alton. This was originally tried by Toronto. Jim Vallance co-writes this. I think maybe Toronto had them as co-writers. 3 minutes 41. Amazing. Love the strings intro on this. Brilliant vocal by Anne, of course. Nice use of the powerful chord progression with your typical minor key progression that's very popular for songwriting now. Then you got Never. So she just said there seems to be 2 mixes of this. The mix I have on the album I had, the vinyl, was slightly lighter. The mix for the video had a bit more guitars, so that's always been better. For some reason, this album's never been remastered, or maybe, hopefully Rock Candy's done it. Maybe by the time this comes out, this vid, maybe they'll have done it. But it would be good to collate all these mixes. Just tracking back, If Looks Could Kill, I've had a mix with different licks on it, guitar licks, not as good. The mix on the vinyl I had is a kind of definitive mix. Then you got These Dreams, no different versions for this. Great Bernie Taupin lyric on this, guy called Martin Page writing it. Beautiful vocal by Nancy. 4 minutes 15, this was a #1 hit, and this really smashed the album. It was the track that kind of broke it into multi-platinum. This album sold 5 million copies, of the #1 album. So it was the band's biggest seller. Then the first incidents where the band writes a song is The Wolf, which is the kind of the hair metal track. Glam metal track to 4 minutes and 3, the last track on the side one, all written by the band with Sue Ennis. I'm wondering here if the band has written it all, or maybe they've credited the whole band just so they've got a cut on the record. So this is a good track, The Wolf. Part I've done heavy tracks before, but what's interesting, the riffing on this, it is sitting in more with the hard rock style, the MTV hard rock style of the time. I've always really liked it. Nice sort of overlapping harmony solo in the middle. So side one was always great on this. It's a shame the band had to use song outside writers, but they picked amazing tracks. What About Love Never and These Dreams are all really big hits. If Looks Could Kill was quite a decent sized hit. Side two opens with, I think what's the weakest track for me is All Eyes. It's got a kind of U2 vibe to it on the guitars. Holly Knight writes this, it says Connie there, so that's probably Sue Ennis, Nancy Wilson and Ann Wilson, Connie and Howie. Could be wrong, that's a name they use for their co-writing. It's a good track, not a great track. And then you've got Nobody Home. This was a track I didn't used to like as much. It was a really good ballad. Ann Wilson and Nancy and Sue Ennis write this. The other thing on this, it's got a really cool solo from Frankie Sullivan. So Ron Nevison the year before produced the Vital Signs album by Survivor. Frankie Sullivan's got a really nice touch away with doing good radio rock solos. So he comes in and does like a really good one. So that's quite interesting that obviously Ron Nevison's thought maybe Howard Leese has done a solo. I think Howard Leese does really good solos, but maybe he's gone, it just needs a bit more of that certain emotion, and Frankie Sullivan brings that. He does 2 breaks on this. Now the same thing happens with Nothing at All, which is another big hit. You might remember the Goofy video when Nancy's doing Dress Up. This is written by a guy called Mark Muller. This has got a great little arpeggiated riff. It's a really good pop track, this. On this, the single version has like a harmony guitar solo, and that seems to be on other compilations. However, on the album, it has a different vocal by Ann, which I think is better. It's a little harder hitting. The vocal on the single's a bit more subdued. And Frankie Sullivan definitely does the guitar solo because he pulls out some licks he actually uses on the Survivor album from the year before. Again, why Ron Nevison wanted that, maybe he got Frankie Sullivan to cut a solo, and somehow he ended up with a European version of this album. So again, what we need is a remaster with all these things collated. I think the kind of harder edge vocal Frankie Sullivan mix is better, but that's what I grew up on. Great track again. This was a big hit. I'm not sure what number it made in America. Then you got What He Don't Know. This is Ann Wilson, Nancy Wilson, and his track through 41. It's quite a nice little acoustic sort of pop track again. Probably one of the weaker tracks, probably the second weakest track on, but it is good. And then you've got Shell Shock, which again mirrors The Wolf. This is written by the band with Sue Ennis again. Obviously wanting to credit everyone for his 42. This is actually better than The Wolf. This is again a full-on rocker, again mirroring the sort of MTV hard rock thing, with a really cool outro lead break from Howard Leese, who, he brings in a few high whammies. It's that thing where he's obviously gone and looked at what's happening in guitar, and he's just tried to develop that. It's worth noting that, for all, Nancy Wilson's always been the focus of Heart as the guitarist. Nancy Wilson's always been the main songwriter, acoustic, rhythm player. She's done very little lead work. It was always Roger Fisher, Howard Leese later on, who did the majority of the lead. I think Even It Up, Nancy does a solo on that. So yeah, Grace Slick does some background vocals. Yeah, Frankie Sullivan's credited here. Peter Wolf, you may remember him from Jay Giles' band. Mickey Thomas as well, the incendiary singer of Starship, Jefferson Starship. He does background vocals, and Mike Klink's engineering. So some big names on this. #1 on the Billboard charts, 5 million sales in America, 600,000 in Canada, 6 times platinum, gold in Japan, gold in Britain. Obviously went gold after Bad Animals became big. So this, this album probably sold 6-7 million copies worldwide. So it's still the band's biggest selling album. So there's that thing where people, obviously, it depends when you got into Heart. If you were into Heart in the 70s, you probably hate this album. This is the album that got me into Heart. So I've always loved it. It is kind of, I think, in my Heart ranking albums, I put it #1. But I'm sort of torn between That Dream by Annie and Dog and Butterfly. When Heart got big in the UK, on the back of the Bad Animals album, they reissued all their early albums, and that's when I got them, and it was quite a shock hearing that sort of folk, Joni Mitchell, Led Zeppelin style. But I think the production does sound a bit brittle now. This is why, if you get the Essential Heart, or listen to that, which is the compilation, the tracks off this album are remastered. They've got a lot more punch. This album really needs, it needs the volume to come up. It needs the bass fattening up, and these remasters I've heard are really good, and I think that would bring the album to life more. But unfortunately, these albums that are big in the 80s don't often have, you end up with a lot of surplus copies out there. And there's not always that will by the record companies to remaster these types of nostalgic 80s music. It doesn't have the pull of classic 70s music. Your early harms have all been remastered by Portrait. Apart from Private Audition, Passion Works, I think. So, I say Portrait's probably universal now, whoever bought them up. So that's my review of Heart on my I Love This Album, Key 1985 album. An interesting album historically to do with kind of the MTV era and ideas of rebooting heritage rock bands by using outside writers, as used by Aerosmith and so forth. Okay, remember to share and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.